Hello everyone, it's Mari here for Honeybee Stamps. I'm going to be creating this sweet little scene card for you today using the amazing On the Farm die set from Honeybee Stamps. This die set has a coordinating card that shows you how you can layer up these different pieces. This is really great for just showing you how these pieces work together. I'm also going to be using the Farmhouse Fields Scene Builder die, and this is just a gorgeous set that coordinates beautifully with the Farmhouse Scene Builder stencils. That's a set of 6 stencils that are going to help you to color in all of the different areas for this sweet little scene. So I'm starting off with the stencil that has the clouds. I've cut down a piece of white cardstock that's about the same size as the stencils. I think it's 5 1/4 square. And I've put my white cardstock onto my Altenew grip mat, and I'm just going to go ahead and then use the stencil to create a little bit of gray on the clouds. So I'm using some Distress Oxide Lost Shadow just to create that little bit of color around the edges of the clouds and just to create that little bit of a cloud impression. I'll set that piece aside and I'll start to work with the die cut piece that was created with that Farmhouse Field Scene Builder die. And now, of course, these coordinating stencils are going to help me color in all of these different areas. So with this stencil here, I'm going to add the colors to all of the leafery on the different trees. So the shrubs down below and then the large tree that's on the right. I'm using a combination of orange and Crackling Campfire is just a really almost like an orangey red and yellows to create the leaves on these trees. Now I am going to list in the description box below all of the different colors of Distress Oxides I used for my inking. I am going to show you the lids for all of the different containers here of ink, all of the different ink pads so that you can pause and see what I'm using if you miss it, but I am going to list them in the description box as well. So I'm just using my blending brushes just to blend these colors together and just adding those different tones of yellow and orange, and then also a little bit of green. So not very much green at all, just a tiny little bit, just to add that little bit of idea that there's still a few green leaves on these trees. This is basically what it looks like right now when I'm filming this where I live in Canada. We're just heading into Thanksgiving weekend. So when you see this, it will actually be Thanksgiving weekend for us. It's the first weekend in October. And the leaves are definitely looking like this, and it was supposed to snow this week, but now they've kind of backed off on that and they're saying rain. So I'm kind of happy about that. So I'm just going ahead and adding a little bit of extra color where there's that white outline. You could leave the white outline there if you want. It actually looks pretty cool, or you can go over that and ink it up as well. Now I'm using a combination of greens and really pretty turquoise here for the grassy hillside. And I'm just going to just change out those stencils and continue to add these different little areas in. This is just really pretty. I like the combination of that teal in there as well with the peacock feathers. It just looks really pretty with the greens and oranges. And I just couldn't resist adding that little touch of that bright color in there. So those two little hillsides are done now. This next section is going to be more of the green at the bottom, and I will go a little bit heavier with this section here just because this is in the foreground. I just thought maybe perhaps this would be a little bit darker and more brilliant with those other hills in the background a little bit more being a little bit lighter. So again, just going in with that teal and adding that really pretty teal hue as well with that green. And now I'm just going to go in with my brown tones and add the branches and the trunk for the tree. And I've wanted to start off with a color that's a little bit lighter and then add some shading with a darker color. Super easy to do with these stencils. I love how these make coloring in a scene like this just so super easy. So now just going in with that ground espresso to add that little bit of shading with a smaller brush. Just kind of trying to stay to the edges of that tree trunk and the branches and leaving some of that lighter brown without the darker brown on it, just to create that variation of color with the shading. It just makes it look more interesting. It makes it look maybe a little bit more realistic. And I love how this looks when it's all finished up. I'm just going to blend those around a little bit more, make sure I've got all of the areas, and then peel that stencil off. So it's looking pretty good at this point. I just wanted to show you how I've been storing my brushes lately. This is a Makeup by Marco layer cake brush caddy. I love that so much. I just wanted to show you that. Now I'm just going to take my trimmer and trim off all of the white edges of the paper here. At this point, I wasn't really sure what I was going to trim off of the colored portions. I knew that I did want to make this into an A2 size card, but at this point I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to trim off. So now you can just see how that layers nicely over the cloud piece. And now I'm just going to put this into my trimmer and trim it off so that it's the right size for an A2 size card front, using the lines on my guillotine trimmer to help me trim these up so that they're just exactly the right size for my A2 size card front. So now you can see that I am going to place these over top of each other onto my top folding white card base. And you can just see how nicely those fit onto my A2 size card front. They layer up beautifully, and I love how the subtle clouds in the background. Now I am going to use my Prismacolor colored pencils to just go ahead and add in some details where these embossed lines are from that die on that Farmhouse Field Scene Builder die. It's really great how that die actually just embosses all of this really cool detail in. And now if you want, you could just take some colored pencils and just go over those little areas just to define those lines a little bit more. I really love how that looks, and you can just add these different little details in with whatever color you want. I tried to go with a tone on tone look here, using a darker green on the lighter green areas and then a darker brown, for example, on the tree trunk and branches. Just going in, like I said, going over those embossed lines just really lightly, and then you can build up your color as you go. And just a really, really super easy way to add just some really nice subtle little details. I used a combination of yellows and oranges over top of the different foliage sections, and that'll finish that off. Now I'm taking a blue color of oxide ink here, just what was left in the brush. I don't even think I inked this brush up, and I'm just going over the cloud area to add in some blue sky. Now you can just see how gorgeous that is all coming together. It's just a really fun way to create this beautiful scene for the front of my card. So now I'm ready to go on to the next step. I'm going to do some die cutting for my little scene. I've die cut out the house and the windmill and the trees from the On the Farm die set. I die cut the house from some blue cardstock and then also some brown details on the house. And the trees are just from a really pretty light green. The windmill is from some brown and gray cardstock. I'm adding some foam adhesive onto the back of this ink blended piece here because I do want to bump this up and add some dimension when I add it onto the clouds. So I'm just adding a little bit of liquid adhesive onto the back of the foam just so that I can wiggle this around a little bit when I get it onto my card base, or as I'm putting it onto my card base, just trying to make sure that I'm adding it from the bottom to the top, ensuring that it's straight as I go. Once I've got that in place, I am ready to start adding the other little details in for my scene. Just going to give that a really good press and make sure that it's nicely adhered. I'll add a little bit of liquid adhesive here to my little windmill. I'm going to add that just behind the hill on the left. And I kind of have a really good idea of where I want to put the house and this little clump of trees. So now I'm going to start to add these details in, and I am going to add the trees on with little bits of foam adhesive, and I do add the little house to the background with foam adhesive as well. Now the foam adhesive that I chose for this is quite thin. It's actually, I would say, half as thin as the foam adhesive I'd normally use, or for example the foam adhesive I used to adhere the trees and hills onto my cloud piece. I just like that, using dimensional adhesive that's just a little bit thinner for some of these little bits so that the card just doesn't get quite as bulky. So I'm just going to use my tweezers to help me get those into place. And now I've got those things in, I'm thinking about, I'm just showing you there, I added some yellow cardstock behind the house to show you that the little window detail is in there as well for the lights inside the house. And now what I did was I actually die cut the trees out again, and there's these little etched lines on the trees to kind of add dimension to them. On the second ones that I die cut out, I actually fussy cut that piece off of the trees. And now I've colored it with a little bit more of the green ink, or I've ink blended over it with that green ink again, just to make these pieces a little bit darker. And when I layer these over top of the base piece, it just really kind of creates that little bit more dimension on these little trees. And I'll show you this up close once I get these glued on here. But it just adds that little bit more dimension onto the trees with that little bit added on there. So I really like how that looks. So now I'm thinking about adding some details as well over the trees or beside the trees. And so I just took the little fence die from the On the Farm set, and I've just added that. I've die cut that with some white cardstock, and now I'm just going to add a little bit of those fencing to either side of the house. It just kind of looks like the fence is actually in the backyard or behind the house, which I really liked the look of, and it fills in some of that space between the trees and the house. So you can just snip these apart to make them as long as you want, and you can add them together to make a really long fence if you want. Really fun to be able to add these details with that On the Farm die set. Of course, that On the Farm die set also includes a barn and a bunch of other different things, some haystacks, a tractor, like so many fun things that you could use to add to these little scenes. So I'll just trim off that excess fence. And now I've taped off the back of my card, and I'm going to add some black soot ink around the edges. And some of you are probably thinking, are you sure you really want to do that? Well, I didn't have to do it, but I do really like how it frames in the project and just adds that little bit of extra detail around the edge. So I am really happy that I did this after I did it. I thought that it just really added some really fun kind of detail to the edges. Now, I didn't want to go too dark with my black soot up in the sky area in that corner, so I went a little bit lighter there, but with the other edges where the ink's a little bit darker, I did add a little heavier hand with that. Now I'm going to go in with my Honeybee Stamps Bee Shimmery watercolor. I love this product so much. It's one of my favorite things from the Honeybee branded products. I love this watercolor. It's so shimmery and pretty. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of it over the entire scene just to add that little bit of sparkle and shine. And I'll just hold that in the light here so that you can kind of see that. It just is really pretty. And then I did that same process with some white paint and added some white paint splatter. It kind of does look like we're just about getting ready for some snow here. And uh-oh, there you go. It snowed, and now we have some white snow on this scene as well. I'm adding a little bit of foam adhesive onto my sentiment. This is from the Heartfelt Hello sentiment set. This is just a really great sentiment set from the Heartfelt Harvest release. If you didn't pick this up yet, you're going to really want it. It's gorgeous. I've stamped out this image in black or the sentiment in black that says Heartfelt Hello, and I've got that added to the top of my card. I'm using a little bit of Nouveau liquid glaze. This is the Nouveau Crystal Drops, I should say, in silver to the center of the windmill, and that's going to finish off my card. Thank you so much for joining me today, friends. I have linked up in the description box below to all of the different products that I've used. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you were inspired. Have an amazing day, friends. Happy Thanksgiving to all of my Canadian friends. Bye-bye.